You know how sometimes a meal leaves you energized and other times sluggish, foggy, or even hungrier? That may be your glucose talking. Foods that are sugar and carb heavy, and you know my experience here, cause your body's glucose levels to spike, often followed by a crash. This matters because it turns out 88% of us have suboptimal metabolic health. So glucose could be the next big thing to track when it comes to health. That's why we're excited about Lingo, a new bio-wearable from Abbott that tracks your glucose in real time.
I've been wearing Lingo for weeks now, and I've learned that for my body, if I move around after I eat a meal, my spike is much more gradual, much lower. And so I've learned that I just need to get up and move around after I eat. What works for me might work very differently for you, but that's what works for my body. To see how your body responds to food and learn what you can do to improve your metabolism, try Lingo. It starts at $49 for a 2-week plan, no prescription needed. For a limited time, save 10% on your first order with Happier at hellolingo.com.
The Lingo glucose system is for users 18 years and older, not on insulin. It is not intended for diagnosis of diseases, including diabetes. For more information, please visit hellolingo.com/US.
Holiday season is just around the corner. And Elizabeth, I am hosting Thanksgiving this year. We got this lake house and we're hosting, and it is so satisfying to get great deals on things that we really need, especially before the holidays. I got a great set of pots and pans for making Thanksgiving dinner from Wayfair. Wayfair is the place to shop for all things home. I mean, there's everything from sofas to spatulas, you name it, they have it. I wanted pots and pans. I got exactly what I wanted. Right now, you can shop Wayfair's insane holiday deals and get up to 70% off during their Black Friday deals.
Wayfair is the go-to destination for everything home, no matter your style or budget. Wayfair makes it easy with fast and free shipping, even on the big stuff. Don't miss out on saving big with Wayfair this holiday. Head to wayfair.com now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday deals. That's WAYFAIR.com.
Hey, Happier listeners. We wanted to let you know that we recorded this book club episode with Elizabeth Strout before the election in the United States. So this conversation won't reflect any events of that day. Hello and welcome to Happier, a podcast where we talk about ideas and strategies about how to make our lives happier. This week, it's the Happier Podcast Book Club. We are so excited. We will be talking about Tell Me Everything with Elizabeth Strout. I'm Gretchen Rubin, a writer who studies happiness, good habits, human nature, secrets of adulthood. I'm in New York City, and joining me today from Los Angeles is my sister, Elizabeth Craft. And Elizabeth, you and I both love to read.
That's me, Elizabeth Craft, a TV writer and producer living in LA. Yes, Gretch, I love to read. I love this book, and I love that Elizabeth Strout also goes by Liz.
I know. I noticed that too. Now, before we jump in, I just wanted to preview that next week I have an exciting announcement that I think our Happier listeners will be interested in. So be sure to tune in to episode 508 for the big reveal. I'm excited about it.
Yes, I am too, Gretch. I can't wait.
Yeah. But now for the Happier Podcast Book Club. 5 years ago, we launched this book club, and today's conversation is about the brilliant novel, Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. And Elizabeth, you and I have read many, many, many novels by Elizabeth Strout. She is a favorite.
Elizabeth Strout is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Lucy by the Sea, O. William, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, Olive Again, Anything is Possible, winner of the Story Prize, My Name is Lucy Barton, The Burgess Boys, Olive Kitteridge, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, Abide with Me, and Amy and Isabel, winner of the Los Angeles Times Art Sittenbaum Award for First Fiction and the Chicago Tribune Heartland Prize. She's also been a finalist for the Penn Faulkner Award and the Orange Prize in London. Elizabeth Strout was born in Portland, Maine, and grew up in small towns in Maine and New Hampshire.
Her latest novel, Tell Me Everything, has generated a huge amount of buzz. It was an instant New York Times bestseller and has met with rave reviews.
Here's a description. With her remarkable insight into the human condition and silences that contain multitudes, Elizabeth Strout returns to the town of Crosby, Maine, and to her beloved cast of characters, Lucy Barton, Olive Kitteridge, Bob Burgess, and more, as they deal with a shocking crime in their midst, fall in love and yet choose to be apart, and grapple with the question, as Lucy Barton puts it, what does anyone's life mean? It's autumn in Maine, and the town lawyer, Bob Burgess, has become enmeshed in an unfolding murder investigation, defending a lonely, isolated man accused of killing his mother. He's also fallen into a deep and abiding friendship with the acclaimed writer Lucy Barton, who lives down the road in a house by the sea with her ex-husband, William. Together, Lucy and Bob go on walks and talk about their lives, their fears and regrets, and what might have been. Lucy, meanwhile, is finally introduced to the iconic Olive Kitteridge, now living in a retirement community on the edge of town. They spend afternoons together in Olive's apartment, telling each other stories. Stories about people they have known, unrecorded lives, Olive calls them, reanimating them, and in the process, imbuing their lives with meaning.
It's such a good book, but we want to remind people that this is a book club discussion, so there will be spoilers. For the purposes of this discussion, we are going to assume that everybody has read the entire book, and we will say this novel does include a few questions of genuine suspense. There is a question about a murder, and there's sort of a will they or won't they. Now, Elizabeth, I have to say, I do not mind spoilers when I'm reading something, but you really do not like spoilers.
I absolutely do not like spoilers. So
Yes.
if I had not read the book, I would wait until I had read the book to listen to this, but many people don't mind.
Many people don't mind, so we're just telling you, forewarned. Welcome, Liz. Hey, Liz.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on this. Thank you very, very much.
Well, we're so excited. We're huge fans of your
Yes.
novels and stories. It's so exciting to get the chance to talk to you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Liz, we want to start with asking you to read the very first paragraph of the book because it says it's the novel. Well, we'll have you read it and then we'll talk about it.
This is the story of Bob Burgess, a tall, heavy-set man who lives in the town of Crosby, Maine, and he is 65 years old at the time we are speaking of him. Bob has a big heart, but he does not know that about himself. Like many of us, he does not know himself as well as he assumes to, and he would never believe he had anything worthy in his life to document. But he does. We all do.
Well, that sets up so many of the themes of the novel. And the novel really makes this clear is it says it's the story of Bob Burgess, but it's the story of so many characters. You can't tell one person's story without starting to tell other people's stories. And then this just can just spread out.
Yeah.
We'll get to the narrator later in the conversation because the narrator is very interesting here. Tell us a little bit about why you started in that place.
Well, that wasn't the first paragraph that I wrote down to start the book. I never write anything from beginning to end ever. But I eventually, as I was figuring out the book, I thought, no, we're going to start this with this paragraph because it sets up, I feel, and I hope it sets up the authoritative voice for the narrator. And then we'll spread out from there.
Well, and what I love is that when I first read that paragraph, it meant one thing. And then when I went back and read it after I'd read the rest of the book, it had a totally different context.
Yeah.
Coming up, we'll have more questions for Liz about Tell Me Everything. But first, this break. Here's something many people are looking forward to as the weather turns cooler. Football games, pumpkin spice lattes, and for me, slipping into a cozy sweater from Quince. Gretchen, I just got the Jersey Red Cashmere crew neck sweater from Quince, and it is the perfect holiday time sweater. It is just such a gorgeous shade of red and so soft, and even in LA, we need cashmere sweaters.
And Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And it's not just that. All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/Gretchen for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Gretchen to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Gretchen.
So, Liz, the novel is framed around Lucy and Olive telling each other stories about people they know, and the idea that everyone has a story. And there's a fascination with what you call unrecorded lives.
Right.
Tell us about that theme.
When I was writing out that first story that Olive is telling Lucy, and I found myself writing unrecorded lives. Lucy says something about all these unrecorded lives. And that stayed with me. And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting phrase. That's really what this book is about.
Yes,
I mean, it's
yes.
about many things, but
Yes.
but the sense that most of our lives are unrecorded, and yet we all have a whole vast interior universe that we're walking around with. And that's always been interesting to me anyway, how the external world bumps up against our interior lives. So when I came up with that phrase, as I wrote it, unrecorded lives, I thought, right, that's all of us mostly.
Right.
And how interesting for me anyway.
The sense that everyone has a story, but also that people want to hear the stories, that there's this desire to listen, and they're so excited. Oh, I have a story for you. Isabel,
Yes,
I have
exactly.
do I have a story for you?
Exactly.
And then Lucy and Bob and Olive are listeners.
Yes.
We are told they are good at listening, and they want to listen.
They are very good at listening. And this was also a part of the book that I wanted to get across to readers, which is that listening is the way we connect. Talking and listening are one and the same if they're really well done.
And then there are moments of not speaking in the book where people connect, like Bob and Catherine in the car when they're children, who remember that moment their whole lives.
Yeah.
Lucy and the stranger on the train, we found really interesting how she fell madly in love with somebody without speaking.
But is she in love with him? Does she say she's in love? They're in
No,
love with
she
him?
just loves him.
loves
She
him.
feels love for him. She's not
She
in love
loves-
with him, but she feels love for
But
him.
I returned and reread that because I was like, how did she characterize that?
No, it was just love. She thought
Intense
she wasn't
love.
in love with him.
Yes, right.
Yes.
So there's listening, and then there's also listening without words.
Right, exactly.
Another really strong theme in this book is this idea that we're all alone, that we can't escape that, and yet we want to connect, that we're sort of caught between these things. And, it's funny, when we were thinking about a passage we wanted you to read to just give listeners a flavor, remind them of the flavor of the book, the nature of the book is that each part is just as important as the other parts. So we found it hard because we're like, to pick that part overweights that part. But there's a really memorable passage that we would love for you to read so that listeners are reminded of the atmosphere of the book.
Lucy stared straight out at the river for a long time, and then she said, Bob, I think that we are all standing on shifting sand. She did not look at him as she spoke. I mean, we don't ever really know another person, and so we make them up according to when they came into our lives, and if you're young, as many people are when they marry, you have no idea who that person really is, and so you live with them for years, and you have a house together, kids together. She stopped and said, sorry. No, go on, Bob said. But even if you marry someone later in life, no one knows who another person is, and that is terrifying. You know how you said you were terrified? As far as I'm concerned, everyone should be. I mean, every so often a couple has a fight, and things get said, and it scares them both profoundly. And yet in a heartbeat, they pretend that fight never happened because they can't proceed with what they just learned. And I understand that, I do. Lucy nodded, still looking at the river. What I'm trying to say, Bob, is that people just live their lives with no real knowledge of anybody. Like that woman who emailed me this morning and might be filled with envy, but I don't know if she is. Lucy said, looking at him now. My point is that every person on this earth is so complicated. Bob, we're all so complicated, and we match up for a moment or maybe a lifetime with somebody because we feel that we're connected to them, and we are. But we're not in a certain way because nobody can go into the crevices of another's mind. Even the person can't go into the crevices of their own mind. And we live, all of us, as though we can. And I respect that, Bob. I do.
Well, it seems to me that part of the novel is the idea that you can get into the crevices of another person's mind through the novel, that is
Yes.
what this novel allows us to do, which is
Yeah.
to go deeper and deeper into different people's perspectives,
Right.
how they see each other. It's so masterful.
Thank you. Yes, I want to make everybody in this book connected to each other.
And by returning to the same characters over and over, it's like you're doing that over time throughout all of your work.
You know, I never intended ever to rewrite a character, which is funny because I mean, obviously I've done that for my whole career, but I did not start out meaning to do that. I thought Amy and Isabel, they're done. Olive Kitteridge is done. And then Lucy Barton is done. And then for whatever reasons, Olive showed up again. So I had to write her again because she showed up. And then Lucy Barton, I thought, wait a minute, let's do her husband. And we had to do that from her point of view. So it just happened. And then I finally realized with this book, oh my goodness, they're all living up there in Maine.
Right.
So let's just do it. So anyway.
And then I was just curious because this is such a distinctive thing now that you're creating this, building out this universe. Now, as a reader, were you attracted to things like Anthony Trollope and Angela Thirkell, who were building a county in England, or like Karl Ove Knausgaard?
Right.
I'm a huge Knausgaard fan, and he's building a sequence where it's shifting characters and you're coming back and back.
I mean, I very much admire all those writers, but in my conscious mind, they were not influencing me. Who knows what my unconscious mind was doing? Because I feel like most of my work is unconscious, but then I look up and I realize, oh, look what I've done. So I can't say that I was consciously influenced by any of those people.
And you're not, as a reader, particularly attracted to that idea of shifting perspective. Interesting.
No. Yeah.
I just think it's so fascinating that we get to see how people's fates unfold over time. Like, I wonder, maybe you miss the character and you want to see what happened now.
By the time I wrote this book, I was curious about all of them again. So I just thought, okay, let's do this.
Well, and I've heard you say that now you're working on a completely different character who's in a completely different location in a different world. But it wouldn't amaze me if he ended up driving through Crosby, Maine one day.
Yeah, wouldn't amaze me either. I have to tell you, at this point, I'm so embarrassed to say, oh, that's it for them, because, you know, I've said that so many times. So I don't dare say anything. But I will say this. I have said this, that Olive Kitteridge, no matter what happens, she will never die on my watch.
Okay.
So
that's
there
good.
we go with that.
We're all happy to hear that.
Yeah.
But is it part of your own wanting to see what happens to them, or wanting to play out a character that is so familiar to you that it is your own kind of writerly curiosity?
Apparently it is, you know, actually. Yes, apparently it is, because these characters like Olive and Lucy and Bob Burgess, when I first wrote about him, I mean, they remained very clear to me. And like I said, Olive popped up again very unexpectedly, but I saw her so clearly and I realized, oh my, you know, I've got to do that again. So I think that these people have become so real to me in a certain way that I do keep wanting to revisit them. Or I did keep wanting to revisit them.
Well, one of the things that is really notable also about your work, and I feel like to say this almost feels damning with faint praise, or this doesn't sound as important as it is, but it is so readable. It is a book where the minute you start, you just go right through, the pages turn, and yet it doesn't, because there's some books where I finish them and it's like, oh, I was just eating potato chips. It was just sheer suspense, just the most crude curiosity that kept me turning the pages, whereas with yours, it feels like it's a beautiful piece of art, and yet you want to keep reading. And that is so hard. We're both writers, so we know the easier it is to read, probably the harder it was to write.
Well, you know, that's interesting. And I think at this point in my career, I think that's voice. Like years and years ago, I remember reading a book and I kept turning the pages and I thought, you know, I don't really care about these people. Why am I turning a page? And then I realized the voice, it's the narrator's voice. And so that's why I do think that the narrator's voice is one reason that we keep turning the page. And this narrator, if you want me to talk about that now, I can.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. This is a very interesting narrator.
Yes.
Right. So this narrator, I understood rather early on that I would have to have a really different, very large narrator who knew everything, and yet at the same time was very inclusive, consciously inclusive of the reader on the page. Now, as a writer, I always think about the reader, and I always have. There's like a reader sitting across from me, basically, that I'm always trying to think of. But this time it was different because I was including that reader on the page in a way. Do you know what I mean? So I would say to the reader, now let's just remember, don't forget that part. We've already been here, or whatever. I would directly address the reader so that they would not feel lost.
Yes.
And I wanted the reader to feel very safe and comfortable with this narrative voice.
So when you're reading it, this is all happening very subtly. And so I think a reader might not even be focused on like, what is the nature of this narrative voice, right?
No,
it's
you
like
don't have to be.
Right, but so I just am going to read. So listeners, this is the kind of thing the narrator says. I'm just going to read different clips from the book.
Yeah.
Oh, poor Pam. Seriously, you should feel sorry for her. Or, as we have just mentioned, there was often a vague discomfort he felt when he watched her preach. And then we know the narrator knows the future. Later, Bob understood that he should have asked more about this condition, but he did not.
Right.
And then one like, oh, Jim Burgess, what are we to do with you? This is like the O. William narrator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a narrator who knows everybody, knows the future. Is it the voice of Crosby, Maine?
It's a narrator's voice. It's a person who's telling the reader a story. And commenting on the story every so often very subtly, like even in the first paragraph, telling the reader that Bob Burgess doesn't know himself as well as he thinks he does. He wouldn't think that he has anything worth documenting, but we all do. This is the narrator talking to the reader directly.
And that's the first time you've done that in a novel? I'm trying to think.
Yes, in this particular way. This was the largest narrator and the most inclusive narrator. I mean, I'm always trying to include the reader, but not as consciously. You see what I mean?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing that struck us, Liz, in reading the book is that on the one hand, people seem trapped in who they are, but at the same time, they also change.
Yes.
Yeah. Even in a tiny way.
Yes. Matt enters the world. Jim reaches out to his son. Margaret acknowledges how she behaved and she improves her preaching. Bob re-engages with his marriage. There's many examples. We love Isabel standing up to her daughter and refusing to leave Maine. That was delightful.
Because all is like, so she's so meek and mousy, she'll never.
I know.
And then William saying, oh, I know, I've got to stop talking about parasites so much.
I know.
So it gives the whole novel a really hopeful feeling that even though we're alone and we have all these issues, we can improve and connect.
Right. And I think that's true. I mean, that's what I do believe, that people can ever so subtly, if they want to and need to, change in a small but very significant way.
Yeah, and that is what makes it hopeful, because you think people can learn from the past, or people can leave the past behind, or they can just find a way forward, even given everything that they've...
Exactly.
And that they can reach out to each other and try to understand. Like the thing with Jim and his son, where it just...
I know.
I know, do you feel sorry for that as a narrator? You're like, oh, you're going to put you through it.
No, I don't feel sorry for the narrator. I just feel sorry for the people as they suffer their different things.
No, that's what I mean, is you as the writer who's like,
you're
this godlike figure who's...
Yes, I just feel so bad for them. And then I think, okay, well, we're going to work that out. We're going to get that worked out.
Wait, here's a strange moment that I just have to like flag. So there is this strange moment in... I think it's O. William, where Lucy sees William without his mustache. And it's just, oh my gosh, it changed her whole conception of him.
And he cuts his hair and takes his mustache off. Right.
Yes. Okay. And so then there's a moment here. And this is, again, the complexity of the narrator, because the narrator is like, hey, remember how that happened to Lucy? I mean, explain the situation with Bob getting his hair cut.
Right. So back in O. William, for anybody who has read it, William has, a lot of hair, and he has a big mustache, and he shaves his mustache and he cuts his hair, and it makes Lucy a little bit taken aback. And so for a while, William has lost his authority with her, is how she sees it.
Itself
so she has
is
to go
very intriguing. Notion.
Right. And then I realized, okay, if Bob gets a haircut, then I need to just remind the reader or let a reader who hasn't read O. William know. So I said Bob had read the memoir where Lucy
Yes.
reacted to the haircut that way, but he had forgotten about it because we often do forget things. So I just wanted, if a non-reader of O. William, to understand that this had already happened with William, and then at the very end to find out the twist that it had a different effect on Lucy.
Yes.
Right. And the narrator said maybe he wouldn't have allowed himself to be seen by her had he known. So I'm just like, this is just levels and levels and levels of understanding people's natures.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's just such a funny thing, this idea that if somebody gets a bad haircut, it really does change the way she sees them. Or not.
Yeah.
Or
Or,
not.
yes, or makes in either direction.
Either direction. Yeah.
Either direction, precisely. And that's why at the very end I was so, all of a sudden I thought, oh, wait a minute. Wait. That haircut. Let's use that in a different way.
Yeah,
Perfect.
We've all had haircuts like that.
Yes, we have.
He's like, he didn't want to leave the house.
I know. We've all had that or known that. Yeah.
Yep. All right, coming up, we've got questions from listeners, but first, this break. Are you unhappy with your hair and skincare products? Have you experienced dry skin and hair, oil buildup, and needing to use more and more products to achieve the results you want from your hair and skin? It's not your products, it's your water. Culligan water softeners stop hard water at the source, providing softer, cleaner water throughout every faucet in your home. With benefits like softer hair and skin, a longer-lasting clean, and less product waste, Culligan has been making water better for people since 1936. And it's not just your hair and skin. Hard water can cause things like water stains in the bathroom and kitchen.
I had this experience when I was showering at my in-laws' apartment. I thought that there was something wrong with my shampoo, and then I realized that the problem with my hair was actually from the water. Culligan has local water experts in your city and offers a free in-home water test to see if you have hard water and address your water concerns. Go to Culligan.com to schedule a free in-home water test.
You know how sometimes a meal leaves you energized and other times sluggish, foggy, or even hungrier? That may be your glucose talking. Foods that are sugar and carb heavy, and you know my experience here, cause your body's glucose levels to spike, often followed by a crash. This matters because it turns out 88% of us have suboptimal metabolic health. So glucose could be the next big thing to track when it comes to health. That's why we're excited about Lingo, a new biowearable from Abbott that tracks your glucose in real time.
I've been wearing Lingo for weeks now, and I've learned that for my body, if I move around after I eat a meal, my spike is much more gradual, much lower. And so I've learned that I just need to get up and move around after I eat. What works for me might work very differently for you, but that's what works for my body. To see how your body responds to food and learn what you can do to improve your metabolism, try Lingo. It starts at $49 for a 2-week plan, no prescription needed. For a limited time, save 10% on your first order with Happier at HelloLingo.com.
The Lingo glucose system is for users 18 years and older, not on insulin. It is not intended for diagnosis of diseases, including diabetes. For more information, please visit HelloLingo.com/US. This show is sponsored by MIDI Health. Gretch, I hang out with a lot of women and we have a lot of conversations. And one thing that every woman shares is that eventually she's going to go through menopause and perimenopause. And people talk about the hot flashes, the insomnia, the brain fog, the moodiness, the weight gain. Well, MIDI clinicians are menopause experts equipped to support you with safe, effective, FDA-approved medications, as well as supplements, lifestyle coaching, and preventative health guidance.
All their services are covered by insurance, and they're conveniently accessible through telehealth visits and 24/7 messaging. You know, when we need help, we want to know that we can come out of an experience feeling heard, with a plan to start feeling better, you know, with people who are really experts in their field. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
Okay, Liz, we are back. We had many listener questions. We'll get to some of them. A lot of people are interested in your process. Like, do you use an outline? How much revision do you do? How much do you cut? You mentioned earlier you don't necessarily write in order, so maybe you don't use an outline.
Yeah.
No, I never use an outline. In fourth grade, when we were taught to outline, I have a visceral memory of being nauseated.
Oh,
Really?
wow.
Yeah, it's funny.
Just feeling trapped?
I just couldn't stand the idea of an outline. And I remember it so clearly. The teacher was such a nice woman, but I just remember thinking, oh, I can't bear this. So I never used an outline, and I don't write from beginning to end, and I never have. And I write in scenes. And so I will write a scene, and if it has what I call a heartbeat to it, it stays on the table. And if it doesn't have a heartbeat, if it's just like dead wood, it gets put on the floor. And so then eventually I look at the scenes and they kind of connect in a way. And I've worked that way for many, many years.
So are you then moving them around in chronology, or they're sort of created separately and then you figure out how to group them together?
Yeah. And then comes a time where I think, okay, now let's make a book out of this. Let's think, where are we going to start? How are we going to proceed? Let's draw the thing like a darning needle. Let's draw it all and sew it up into a narrative.
So did you have an idea, though, about like the murder, how that would resolve, or you found it over time?
No, I don't know how anything's going to resolve itself. That's the truth. I really don't. I just think, okay, let's have this murder. And so, I sort of saw this quarry, and then I saw a red wig, and, I don't know. I just don't know how these things happen. But then I realized, as I wrote more about Matt, I thought, I really like this guy. I don't think he did it. And so, yeah. And so I thought, oh, okay, that sister, she's, troubled. She's going to be the one. So
that scene in the airport where all of a sudden her like skeletal face comes out.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
That's exactly right. Because I
Diane.
had Bob and Lucy sitting there and I thought, okay, what are they going to do in New York? And then I realized, well, off the plane comes Diana Beach.
And it went to how good of a guy Bob is that he immediately turned
unquestioningly.
around.
Yes.
I know.
He's just such a good
so
guy.
good, and he doesn't even know it.
Yeah, and he completely changed the course of everything, you realize
Yes.
later.
Yeah. So I realized, oh, wait a minute, there's a reason she's getting off that plane, and we've got to turn around, do a U-turn.
Yeah, that thing where Bob picks up the phone and he goes, no sirens at all.
Yeah.
He knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of stitching it together the way you say, one thing that is also notable is it's divided into 4 parts. Each part is divided into sections, and the sections have parts. There's space between paragraphs. Sometimes there's an asterisk. Sometimes there's not. I didn't actually stop to like do an analysis of what that meant. How do you use those structural
Exactly.
breaks?
I think it's the way my brain is working. So I will think to myself, okay, we're just going to have a space there. Not necessarily an asterisk, but we're going to have a space. And I think I've come to realize, because my writing has evolved over, since Amy and Isabel, there were not many spaces. And over the course of my career, I've had more and more space breaks. And I realized at this point, the space break is there, I think, for the reader to be able to enter the story with their own story. Because every reader will come into the book with their own story, and in a way that makes it a different book for everyone. But I want to give them a little break to be able to do that.
So it's a reflection moment, or like a pause.
Reset.
They don't have to reflect if they don't want to, but I just want to give them a little hiccup of a break. And then if there's an asterisk, it's probably because there's some slight change of thought or scene or something.
Like cut to,
Yeah.
as Elizabeth would say.
Speaking of cut to, Joe asked, he said, my name is Lucy Barton, was made into a one-woman show. All of Kitteridge became a TV miniseries, and Amy and Isabel was a movie. What is it like to have your work adapted in this way, and are you part of the process?
All 3 were very different. I was part of the process with Amy and Isabel. With Olive Kitteridge, I spoke for about an hour with the writer. I spoke for an hour with the director. And then Frances and I would meet. She was living in New York. We would meet every so often to talk about Olive. But otherwise, I was not a part of that at all. And that was very interesting. When it came out, I was just so glad and relieved. I thought they did a great job. My Name is Lucy Barton, I went to the rehearsals, and I don't feel that I was involved, but they wanted me there, and it was really interesting. And that's actually where O. William came from, because at one point, I mean, in My Name is Lucy Barton directly tells the reader, I'm not going to talk about my husband. I mean, we know a few facts about him, but she says, I'm not going to talk about him. And so she doesn't.
She says that about several things. I'm not going
Right.
to talk about that. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
then Laura Linney said something about William and took a step forward. And all of a sudden, I literally saw over her head these words, "Oh, William," with a surprise mark. And I thought, oh, William, he's going to have his story. And so I don't think it would have happened if I hadn't seen her in that rehearsal.
Interesting.
Wow,
Yeah,
that gives
just
me
boom.
chills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does she know that? Did you tell her
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Oh, how fun.
It's so interesting. And then I realized it would have to be narrated from Lucy's point of view. So there I was again with Lucy.
And so it sounds like you've had a good experience, because sometimes
Yes.
people are devastated
No, I've had
or very
a very good
discouraged.
experience
Oh.
with my adaptations. Very happy with all of them. So,
Well, and maybe sort of related, Erin asks, do you read reviews of your novels?
I don't. And I knew from Amy and Isabel intuitively, I just understood, I'm easily excitable. So let's not go there. And
Yeah.
so I don't. I don't.
Yeah.
Once in a while, somebody will say, you should read this, or put it in front of me or something. And I'll read, I might read it or a part of it or something. But if it's good, it's dangerous. And if it's bad, it's even more dangerous. So I just don't do that.
Completely agree. Melissa asks, why did you decide to include a murder mystery? Is that to keep the reader listening?
I don't know. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
know why I did that. That's so interesting.
Even when you read the description, I'm kind of like, this makes it sound like it's a murder mystery, which it kind of
Yeah.
is, but that's just one small part of what's going on.
It was so interesting because, like I said, I just kept thinking of this quarry, an old woman dumped into a quarry,
Yeah.
thought, red wig. And I realized, okay, we're going to have like a little murder. And I thought, why? You don't do that. I was so confused, but I did. And then the third person I dedicated the book to is a lawyer here in Maine. And I went to him to talk, because I needed legal advice on it. And I just, I don't usually talk about my work when I'm doing it, but I said, what about this quarry and, this red wig? And he goes, I like it.
Very
So I was
Maine.
like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funny. But I don't know where that came from. I don't know.
Well, I forget what character says it, but they say, why does a 65-year-old woman kill her mother?
Yes.
That is so much of the story of like, how do you
question.
understand that? What would make you think,
Right.
I understand how that happened?
Yeah. And I had to figure that out. And I had to put that question in there because it's a real problem. It's a real question. And whenever there's any sort of weakness, the writer needs to address it before the reader has fully figured it out. So I had to give that weakness to the reader and say, why would she do this? And then answer it, which is, I think that she had suffered so much. And then the final
Yes.
dissolution of her marriage with her best friend was just too much. And she just,
Yeah. She'd buried everything all that
she
time.
had buried
but
everything her whole life. And then
couldn't-
that was just finally too much.
But then it's so interesting because, again, it's like as things unfold and like the satisfaction of knowing and understanding. Because when Bob and Matt are first talking and Bob is thinking, he's not telling me everything, he's holding
Right.
something back. And you're suspicious of Matt at that point. So you think it's going to be something about his own guilt. But then later he says very frankly to Bob, oh, the minute I heard about it, I knew Diane had done it.
Yeah,
I was just protecting her.
he was.
That's why he was
Exactly.
hesitating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because he had nobody else in the world. He had
Yes.
his sister and his mother.
Well, what about that brother?
Ah.
Again, about Tell Me Stories, I'm like, okay, I want to know about
Yeah.
the older brother. What's going on with the psychiatrist?
Yes.
He had a little bit of more of a role in my earlier drafts.
Deleted
Oh.
scene.
I had him up to no good himself with Diana. And then I realized that's too much. That's just too much.
Well, somebody suggests that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
his eyes are cold.
Yeah.
And I just thought, okay, we're going to pull back from that.
Okay, well, here I have my last question is a very specific question, which is, did you, Liz, have some great experience with a guidance counselor in your life? Because there are two examples of guidance counselors who are portrayed as these heroic figures who changed the fate of the children in their care.
Right.
Oh, William, I did a whole Little Happier about it. And I'll put a link to the Little Happier to any listeners who want to listen to that, just like my take on that story of the guidance counselor buying the clothes for Lucy. So she had
Right.
and Lucy saying, can we pretend like you're my mother? Of
know.
course, Lucy.
I know.
Oh, so did you have a great guidance counselor?
I did not. I mean, there was nothing wrong with her, but I didn't really have a relationship. I didn't have a relationship with her at all.
Maybe you didn't need to. Yeah.
I did. I mean, I don't think I did, but no, it's funny. I did not have any special connection to a guidance counselor, and these just sort of organically came from what I was working with. I will tell you that I've always liked pharmacists.
Oh.
Yeah. I think it's because my father was a scientist and he used to wear a white lab coat. And back in the day, pharmacists would wear white lab coats.
Yes.
So I think in my head, I do like pharmacists.
Mine still does wear a white lab coat, as a matter of fact.
There you are.
But it's also an intimate connection. Nobody knows you quite the way your pharmacist does.
I know.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's a telling insight.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You're
Right.
right.
You can know somebody from the contents of their purse or the contents of their medicine cabinet or their playlist.
Exactly.
Okay, Liz, we always ask our guests if they have a try this at home suggestion, something simple that an ordinary person could do as part of an ordinary day to make their lives happier, healthier, more productive, more creative. Do you have any suggestions?
I would suggest turn off your cell phone. Start with an hour. And then if that works and you feel a little bit lighter or more productive, then make it 2 hours. But that's what I would say.
And do you do that?
Try to turn your cell phone off. I do.
And how do you manage your cell phone?
I turn it off when I'm working, but then I'll check it like after an hour or so, and then I will try and keep it off.
And you literally turn it off. You don't even just put it in another room.
No, I turn it off.
That must be key.
Yeah, why is that?
Because it feels gone for me that way.
It's like the before times when it's turned off.
Precisely.
Also, there's a little bit of friction when you're waiting it to come back up. And I think that's why people put it in another room, because they don't want to have to wait while it's coming back up. But this is good because that little bit of friction makes it
precisely.
Interesting.
And so to turn it completely off is to be alone.
I'm going to try that.
And how many hours a day would you say you do that?
Well, actually probably about 1 hour.
Okay.
but like I said, sometimes, sometimes 2 hours.
Yeah.
But it's been very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, we'll try it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz.
Yes, lovely to have talked to both of you, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
It was such a pleasure to read this novel. Remember, whenever it is and wherever you are, there's always a book waiting for you. The resource for this week: if you are in the season of gift giving and you're having trouble thinking of gift ideas for someone, take the gift giving quiz to get ideas. It's so much fun. It's at GretchenRubin.com/quiz.
It's very helpful.
Thank you. And that's it for this episode of Happier. We hope you all enjoyed Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout.
Thank you to our guest, Elizabeth Strout. Read her wonderful novels. Thank you to executive producer Chuck Reed and everyone at Odyssey. Get in touch. Gretchen's on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and TikTok at Gretchen Rubin, and I'm on Instagram and Threads at Liz Craft. Our email address is podcast@GretchenRubin.com.
Well, you know what we'd like you to do. We would love it if you would rate us. We love those 5-star ratings. We would love a review. And here is your rhyming reminder. Love what you hear? Tell a peer.
Until next week, I'm Elizabeth Craft.
And I'm Gretchen Rubin. Thanks for joining us. Onward and upward. So, Elizabeth, given what Liz Strout said, do you predict that the project that she's working on now will either in the first novel or at some point will intersect with Crosby, Maine, or not? What do you predict?
Yes, I think not the first novel, but after that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for it.
She's building out a universe. It's fun to see how it all intersects.
Yes.
from the Onward Project.